In previous videos, we've talked about relationship red flags. In specific videos, we've talked about cheating red flags, how to know if your spouse or significant other is cheating on you. But in today's video, we're going to talk about relationship red flags beyond the cheating concept. Red flags that you can see in a relationship and things that you need to be aware of in order to safeguard yourself, protect your boundary, and inevitably empower yourself into a very healthy, successful lifestyle. So let's deep dive into that today. In the beginning of a relationship, there's many subtle red flags, subtle signs that things are happening, but often they go, well, under the radar. We don't catch them. And gaslighting is one in particular, where the other person will manipulate us to question ourselves onto what really took place or what happened in a situation. Maybe there was an argument and the other person's claiming that you said something or did something that you don't remember saying and you don't remember doing. And so you start to question yourself. You start to question your own memory and even your own sanity. And that can be a definite red flag, but you might not be picking up on it just yet. Also, controlling behavior. Many times when we get into a relationship, we expect the other person to kind of be there a lot. You know, they're always kind of asking us questions, spending a lot of time. And so that might restrict our independence as well as our personal autonomy, but we don't really catch the fact that this is actually controlling behavior. Like maybe they're telling you that they don't want you on the phone or they don't want you working to this time or doing that or doing this. And you see it as maybe caring or the new part of the relationship. Well, this might be just controlling. And so this is the beginning and it's very subtle. As well as emotional invalidation. When somebody invalidates feelings, they dismiss your feelings, they dismiss your concerns, they dismiss what you've accomplished or what you've done in your life. You know, they make light of things like that. And it's kind of hard to see because in the beginning you're not expecting this. In the beginning you're kind of like, oh, it's the honeymoon phase. Many of us might call it the love bombing phase, where things seem to be great and you're really connecting with that person. It seems like they really care about you and they're putting a lot of energy in the relationship. So you may be overlooking some of these subtle red flags. Now, when we talk about relationship red flags, one thing that I want to discuss as well is the language of disrespect, okay? You got to really focus when somebody's disrespecting you. And we've always heard when people say, it's not what you said, it's the tone of how you said it. And that is a big deal. So when somebody's tone is very condescending, when it's very condescending or they're using patronizing language or sarcasm, that's one kind of indication that there's some disrespect there. And so that's something to really look out for. And sometimes we're not catching it, or sometimes maybe that's not really what they meant, or that's not really what they said, or we question that they even said that. Also, put downs or any sort of name calling is definitely a red flag. Constant criticism, belittling you, putting you down, criticizing what you're doing, as we've heard, pinpricks, right? So constant criticism, constantly doing that over and over again, which can also create some anger, but definitely can create some triggering there. But also a lack of empathy. When somebody has the failure to acknowledge or to even care about how you feel or to understand how you feel, invalidating your emotions, these are big red flags that literally go under the radar. And a lot of times this can be happening for quite a bit of time before there's this kind of cycle of what I'd like to call abuse. And I want to walk into that cycle of abuse because a lot of these red flags and a lot of these things have been happening, but what's happening over a period of time is it's compounding. So you're constantly going through that tone with them, the put downs, the name callings, the arguments, the lack of empathy. It all kind of goes hand in hand. So let's jump in to talk about how this cycle creates a cycle of abuse. If you're liking this content so far, please consider subscribing to the channel as well as liking this particular video. I appreciate it because it makes us know that we're doing something right. So let's jump back into the concept of the cycle of abuse. So the cycle of abuse in a relationship starts with what we call the honeymoon phase. Many of you call it the love bombing phase, right? Where there's a lot of charm, there's a lot of connection, there's a lot of attention, there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of affections, there's a lot of things going on at one time that feels really good. But when that's happening, the stuff that's off to the side that's happening, these red flags, they kind of go unnoticed because of all this other stuff, right? So we kind of let it go because we're feeling pretty good about it. And so the name calling or this or the argument, we let it go, okay? But that changes in the second cycle, which is the tension buildup phase. It's this phase of lots of tension building up. That kind of sex is waning a little bit. The charm is, it's not so much there as much. The affection is not so much there. And all of a sudden the resentment begins to grow. And the conflict is now constant. So when there was like, there was conflict in the beginning, but it wasn't constant. And now with the tension buildup, it's constant conflict. There's constant argumentation, there's constant name calling, arguments, pin pricking, that sort of thing on a constant basis. But then you get to that next phase, which I call is the explosion phase, which is the constant outbursts. Constant outbursts of verbal abuse, anger, even violence in the situation. So you get to that point where it's the honeymoon phase and the tension and the explosion. And that's when you really know, okay, this is not a great deal. This is not a healthy relationship. I need to be aware of what's happening. So we hope we get to it before we get to the explosion phase so you can actually prevent this from happening. But in the process, we have to get to the concept of how do we create and set healthy boundaries. Okay, so first off, we have to realize our worth, our self-worth. We have to realize our personal self-worth, our value, and our needs, right? A lot of times we're in these relationships, we're giving till it hurts, and we're not getting much back, right? We might even be codependent to some degree in this relationship, letting somebody kind of walk all over us, treating us poorly and worse than anybody else that you've ever let treat you that way. It's very interesting when we get in these relationships. It's like, whoa, what happened to my identity? What happened to myself? How did I lose myself? So really beginning to see your worth separate from this relationship, realizing the value that you bring to the table to any relationship, whether it be a romantic, friendship, family, what have you. Another interesting aspect is the clear and assertive communication. That's something that many of us don't do, is expressing our boundaries clearly, concisely, confidently, consistently. Okay, so if you're dealing with somebody that's kind of abusing you in the situation, it's putting those boundaries up, being consistent. You're not having to explain yourself and standing up for those. Once you set the boundaries, you have to set clear what you're going to do. And also seeking coaching or therapy, as well as reaching out to your trusted old friends and your family members that you can confide in, because you need to definitely have that support system around you in the situation and make sure that you're safe and okay, and have somebody to talk to about what's happening so that they can also help to empower you. So how do we empower ourselves for a healthy future? Because I know that if you're dealing with this type of situation right now and you're dealing with these red flags, you don't want to live with this forever. This is not what you want to deal with forever. You want to move on. You want to get more powerful. You want to get more healthy in your life. And so one thing that you really want to work on is recognizing your personal triggers. And that's very important, because when somebody is pinpricking or making comments or saying things about you, that can trigger you. And being able to understand, why does this trigger me? Why does this upset me? And then kind of looking at the patterns of conflict that you've seen in this relationship. Have you ever experienced those types of patterns of conflict in other relationships? Have these triggers that you're experiencing in this relationship, have that been something that you've dealt with in the past as well? Because that helps us to really understand ourselves. I guess the only good thing that comes out of some of these red flags is the fact that we get to understand a little bit more about what makes us tick, what makes us happy, what makes us at peace, and what makes us really angry. So at least we can take that information, which is very valuable, so we can begin to work on that, understand it, so that it's no longer a trigger anymore. Another concept that's very important to practice is the practicing self-care, putting you as a priority. I'm not talking about becoming a narcissist and all self-centered, but putting yourself as a priority in your life, checking on your own well-being, caring about your own health, caring about your own sleep, and actually seeing your value separate from your relationship, seeing that you actually have value as a human being. It's very important, because once we actually realize that we have value, and I'm not saying, oh, we're God's we're God's gift to humanity. I'm just saying we have value, right? Once we see that, we won't accept a lot of this cycle of abuse. It's not acceptable behavior, because we're not doing it to them. We don't give this. We don't want to receive that as well. We're not giving this. We're not putting this down. We're not picking this up. This is not what we want to deal with. So once we begin to see that value, we begin to see that other person doesn't see our value. But also, even then, if they actually saw their own value, really honest value, they wouldn't be dishing out what they're dishing, because they wouldn't want to hear it as well. They don't want to hear the yelling and the screaming and that sort of thing if they really saw their own value, because they wouldn't participate in that type of relationship. But last but not least is to move on. And one of the biggest things we can do to empower ourselves, to create our boundaries, to create a healthy future, is to end unhealthy relationships and really focus on creating that peace of mind. Focus. It's not about like this glorious happiness. We all hear about this, oh my God, happiness. It's about focusing on peace of mind, connecting with ourselves, and then finding those relationships that work for us, finding those relationships where they understand our value and see our value, as well as we see their value and they see their own value. Because when we're all coming to the plate with that type of healthy mentality and healthy work on ourselves, we're going to get that back in return in the relationship. And we can also grow together instead of growing apart or hurting one another. I hope this content has helped you, and I hope that you can share this with others. I hope it's resonated with you. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do. It helps us realize that we're doing something right, as well as give us a thumbs up on this video if you liked it. In the comment section, I'm interested, have you ever gone through this cycle of abuse? And at what point did you realize what was really happening? Because I find that with many people, it takes that wake-up call. It's that one thing that happened that you go, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening in this relationship. And then you kind of go back and you look at the body of work, the entire relationship, and say, oh my God, okay, this is when I knew that this was not right. This is when I knew that this was unhealthy. This is when I knew that there was something wrong. I'd love to hear from you because I'd like to know what that point was in that relationship. It's always interesting to talk about these things and to grow with one another to understand, because we can really get an idea, and we can also see that in our own life and also use that to empower ourselves. Oh, and by the way, don't forget to live your true life.